This is Ella Cerrone reporting for James Cole. Today's topic is get damn good at your sacrifice. And so I think the most useful thing to start with is just another laydown. I know we talked about this last week or last session, but just what you think your sacrifice is in your words.
I'm not exactly sure. I know right now it's the hub. It's like becoming as good an entrepreneur, as good a business mind as I can be. A lot of my clients recently, I've started just sort of consulting in a broader way and helping to strategically think through lots of different problems. And it's been really cool to get different reps on different types of businesses and prove to myself either that I don't know something and to learn it, or that I do, that I have learned a lot about how businesses function and how they work. So I think just like understanding business, being a good operator, um, cleanly executing a thought so that a business can grow and impact people.
And did you ever anticipate that that would be your sacrifice?
I think when I was, I've always, I never really fit the mold. Like when I was young, I had trouble in school following the instructions and reading the books and writing the essays the right way. And I always had a very entrepreneurial mind. I like made custom t-shirts when I was a kid to sell on an island that I went to. And um, my mom would let me get one treat at the supermarket, which was usually like one sugary cereal. That was like my reward for going with her to the supermarket. And I would always pick the sugary cereal that looked good but also had like a sweet prize inside. And when I got home, I'd dump out all the cereal into bowls until I could find the prize, get the prize, put all the cereal back. And it was really just about getting the prize more than it was the cereal. Um, so doing things fast, doing things creatively, doing things differently has always been how I've operated. So I don't know that I would have known that it would have been the hub per se right now or whatever I'll do next, but sort of a different, more entrepreneurial path, I think probably has been in the tea leaves. Yeah.
And then this concept, get damn good at your sacrifice. You've mentioned previously that it's not your idea. How did you come across it, and why did it resonate with you?
Well, I think the reason I find it so powerful is because I've heard it said by many, many people in many, 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 many different forms. Um, the person that says choose your damn sacrifice is Jordan Peterson, who we've spoken about before, I think. Um, and he has a great clip online about it, which I paraphrase. So he's the one that said choose your sacrifice, but a lot of people, even on this podcast, we've talked about discipline equals freedom. That's a Navy SEAL that says that, named Jocko Willink, or conservative now, liberal later. Matthew McConaughey said that. You know, there are a lot of people that I've been listening to from all walks of life who talk about the importance of like restricting yourself, being disciplined, choosing a sacrifice, being a beast of burden so that you may actually experience freedom, fulfillment. Um, so it's sort of a paradox, right? Like we all think that we should be, everyone in our country, most people in our country seek like retirement, seek the time when they don't have to do anything. But if you've ever had the privilege of doing nothing, like Jim Carrey says, I wish everyone could have the good fortune to become rich and successful, just so you can see how unfortunate being rich and successful actually is. Matt Damon has this great story about winning the Oscar for Good Will Hunting at age like 25, coming home, his girlfriend at the time passing out from all the exhaustion of the hullabaloo. And he puts the Oscar down on his TV stand and gets into bed and can't sleep, and it's just sort of looking at it as the lights coming in through the window sort of glinting off of it, and you know, from the street light, and just realizing like, is this it? Like I thought I'd feel something more. And he talks about how he feels so lucky that at age 25, he's realized that like winning the thing, getting to the top of the mountain isn't actually the prize. It's the restriction, it's the focus, it's the journey, not the destination. So these are all ideas that we've heard a million times from lots of different people. And I think that's why it resonates so much with me, because choosing your sacrifice, or the hourglass, which is my sort of visualization of it, going into that bottleneck is, I think, a big part of happiness.
And so then how are you getting good at your sacrifice right now? What does that look like on the day to day and also on the macro?
Well, I think a big thing we talked about is restriction. So I learned the hard way from, it's funny, I was talking on another podcast that isn't mine, it's a friend of mine, uh, about cooking, and how cooking used to be a big escape for me, and how I'd make it as complex as possible. And I really enjoyed the bleeding edge of chaos and order, where as many sauces and textural elements and sizzling pots and pans I could get going at once while somehow bringing it in for a landing, the more of a thrill I would get. And I talked about how that's more in line with like a French canon, if you were to look at Western cooking, which is predicated or built on 5 main sauces. The French canon is. Whereas Italian cooking is all about simplicity, fewer ingredients, letting the ingredients speak for themselves, being as restrained as possible, and finding elegance through that restraint. And so I talked about how when starting my company, my cooking got much more simple. And through running a company, I've learned how the most simple way to do something is often the best, is often the most elegant. I think this is a misappropriation, but Mark Twain apparently quipped, and I don't think it was him. I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. It's this idea that like doing less is sometimes harder. It's harder to say as much with fewer words, but it's more elegant to do so. So I think restraint is a big answer.
And then in entrepreneurship and just, business life, whether you're talking to clients and they want to do everything all at once and be everything to everybody, or other entrepreneurs who want to launch the one company to rule them all, basically. Where do you think people get wrong with doing too much, and how can you advise that they move towards simplicity?
Well, I think we've talked about this before. It's like, this is a less poetic, more mathematical way of approaching it, but lifetime value over customer acquisition costs. Like, how much is a customer worth to you, and how much did you pay to get her? That's like the lifeblood of any business. Ideally, you have the customer paying you more over her lifetime, coming back and buying 10, 15, 20 ice cream cones from your shop, even though you only paid $10 to get her attention in the first place from the flyer or from the ad that you ran. So the best way to efficiently run a business is to figure out who the hell you're talking to. Like, who would be most compelled by what I'm selling, and then find a way to say what you have to say to them and not waste your breath on other people who don't like ice cream. And that's true in business, and it's true. I always give the example of like the high school lunchroom, where, most high schoolers, at least for me, I walked in and I wanted everyone to like me, and I didn't really know who I was. Some kids seemed to sort of have an idea. They were like a jock, or they played the violin, or they were in chess club, or they, whatever they did, whatever they did. I didn't really know. So I would sort of sit with different people and try to be different things to different people. And the high school lunchroom rewards you for knowing, or at least thinking you know who you are, right? If you're the chess kid and you sit down at the chess table, you have other people that are like, hey, well, we're so happy you're here. You're just like us. We're friends. If you don't know who you are, then you belong to no one. You belong nowhere. So I think in life, you're rewarded by knowing what it is that you care about and what you want to stand for, and then surrounding yourself with other people that hold those views, so that they can share in your reality and you can share in theirs. So whether it's for a person or for a business, like, know who you are first, tighten and iterate that, and then go and find people that with whom that resonates.
This idea of the lunchroom, I think, is really interesting because right now you're not finding these people. You're literally in a tiny house by yourself. And so I'm curious, is this process that you're currently on in any way part of getting good at your sacrifice? And if so, how?
Yeah, well, I mean, remember, like the first step of the lunchroom is like you holding the tray by yourself right after you've gotten your food, and you're like, where do I go? And you look over here and they're jocks, and you look over there and they're chess club people, and you look over here and they're gothic people. And the first step is, who am I? And the next step is, what are my options? So I'm in a tiny house by myself, just really solidifying who I am so that I can better assess the table where I should be sitting. So the first step actually doesn't have anything to do with what other tables are in the lunchroom. It has to do with really meditating on who it is that you are. Again, this isn't my idea, but the egotistical utilitarian, this idea that you're egotistical, you're self-focused, but ultimately it's to serve others. But you have to first go in. You have to first be holding the tray and asking yourself, where do I want to sit today? Who am I? Before you then look out and see what the options are.
I'm curious if you don't mind me asking what predicated the tiny house.
A lot of things. I mean, I got in a fight with my family. I was living with my parents, and I think just feeling like I was at the wrong table. You know, I think with your family, you reverse the order I just mentioned. You sit down first and ask questions later, right? Because you're said, not to get too heady, but you're sort of born sitting down at the table, right? You're a part of the family from birth, and so that those are the rules. The people around the table, like that's the vibe, that's the pathology, and you don't have a chance to ask yourself like, where do I want to sit today? You're just sitting there. So I think as I've grown up, you know, as we all do, and you start to ask, who am I? What am I all about? I'm sure most people can relate to this, you know, whether it's politically or religiously or just philosophically, you realize that there are things that you believe that your family might not, or vice versa, and tensions can arise. So I had sublet out my apartment because I wanted to save some money for the company. So living with my family through COVID, then got in a tense situation with my family and left, and I had nowhere to go because my apartment was occupied, and I didn't want to be with my family, and I didn't want to encumber friends for more than a couple of days. Plus with COVID, it just seemed complicated. So I just rented a small, affordable house in the middle of nowhere.
To pivot very, very briefly, just the idea of getting good at your sacrifice also requires a lot of work, and it's not going to be comfortable, which we've talked about a number of times. And within that, I think there's a lot of space for people to fail in a lot of ways. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that, and also what you think separates the people who fail from the people who succeed.
Um, I would reframe everything you just said. I mean, first of all of those negative words are the point. They're not a byproduct. They're the product. So you need it to be difficult. Like I didn't say like choose your passion. I said choose your sacrifice, which again is Jordan Petersonism, but choose your sacrifice. It's a sacrifice. Like we're beasts of burden, you know, like, I think we've talked about this, how when you physically exercise, it's like I've heard parts of this somewhere else too. Again, I'm sort of stitching together lots of different ideas, but um, that physically like societally okay with feeling pain. Like you're out for a run and your lungs are kind of stinging and your legs are a little wobbly, and if you were feeling that way when you were sitting on the couch, you'd go right to the hospital. But it's like, no, I'm on a run. This is good for me. I'm getting in shape, right? We're conditioned to think that pain under those circumstances, no pain, no gain. Like you need pain to gain something physically. And it's the same thing with a philosophical or existential journey. You have to struggle, I think. So all of those things aren't just like an unfortunate product of the situation. It actually needs to happen. And then you said, what's the difference between those who fail and those who don't? I mean, like failure is part of it. I think failure can be, I failed and so I'm going to stop, or failure can be, that didn't work, so I'll try something different. So it's one simple word, which is iteration. It's like, if you give up, if you stop, then you have failed. And if you don't, then you're just an iterator. I think we've talked about this before, the idea of a pivot. We talked about Slack and how they were trying to be one very specific company and then ended up being a completely different company. And so they failed, but then they also succeeded wildly. And that's all of us. Like anyone can look back at their life, in any moment where you switched the path. We've all switched a path at some point. The person we were dating, or the profession we intended to have, or any major life decision that went awry has led us to where we are. And so people that are less existentially sophisticated, I would say something like, everything happens for a reason. And I would instead just say, you end up where you end up, and then you look backwards and everything makes sense. You are where you are today because of the decisions you made yesterday. And so if you wake up today, you're like, oh, well, thank God I took a left there and a right there and went straight there, because otherwise I wouldn't be here. So no matter where you end up, you would be saying, thank God I took those turns, because you are where you are. So it's not that everything happens for a reason. It's that you definitionally end up somewhere. And the choices you made to get you there, the end justifies the means. I am where I am today, and the path I took to get here was worth it. That's how we conceptualize our reality and don't all crumple in the fetal position every day.
I want to circle back to this contrast between the choice of words that you focused on, choose your passion versus choose your sacrifice, because I think it's really interesting. Is there a reason why the more, I guess the easiest way to describe it would be the more negative, but just the less, the less positive, because choose your passion is inherently like the more positive phrase, why that resonates with you, and do you think that extends to all of your life?
I just think it's the reality. Again, I talked about my roommate before, who's an Olympic runner. Like, if you want to be an Olympic runner, it's not like you can just have God-given ability and go for a run every now and again, right? Like, it's like you're up against the best in the world and they're pushing themselves as hard as they can. So you've got to push yourself even harder. It's like pretty much just a constant pain experience. Like every single day you're pushing yourself. There's a book called Once a Runner that every professional runner I know worships. It's like the running Bible, sort of a lesser known book, but amongst real runners, Once a Runner, if you ever want to read it. And it talks about breaking down your shoes, rubber molecule by molecule, and breaking down your body and rebuilding your body, muscle fiber by muscle fiber, and like the slow process of becoming, of getting better, of getting stronger, and getting addicted to that process, and kneeling at the altar of that process. So for all of us, like, to become anything requires honing ourselves, breaking ourselves down, pushing up against something hard and challenging, and realizing that you are, Jordan Peterson talks about anxiety, and he says overcoming anxiety is not about having less fear. It's about having more courage. So yeah, I just think that no matter what path you walk in life, if you're doing anything worthwhile, it will be challenging. And to be challenged and to not all the time, but sometimes overcome that challenge, like that's fulfillment. That is actualizing, that's strengthening. Just like you become faster on the track, that's a very measurable thing, but you can become better at what you care about by challenging yourself. And you have to, if you're not failing ever, then definitionally it's way too easy and you're not actually getting better. So failing means that some percentage of the time you weren't good enough, which means that you're right on the bleeding edge of being good enough and not good enough. And that's exactly where you want to be.
I think throughout this conversation, there's also this thread line, and I'm just curious. There's also that sentence, choose what you love and you'll never have to work a day in your life. But from my understanding of this conversation, you would want people to go to the work. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that kind of.
Yeah. I mean, find what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I think what that's trying to say, and it hides the truth a bit, is like when you when you choose your sacrifice and it doesn't choose you, you have some autonomy and governance. And so you're waking up every day pushing yourself towards a challenge of your own volition. It hasn't like, it's not like grabbing you by the scruff and pulling you out into the world out of your warm bed every day. You're stepping into it. That's why I said it's not that you become less fearful. It's that you become more courageous. You're like, I'm going to meet this challenge, as opposed to like, oh my gosh, I have to do this thing. So I think that's what that expression is trying to capture is if you choose your sacrifice, you're choosing it. And so it feels less violating, you know, but you're still having to sacrifice and you're still having to work very hard. So I don't think you get out of this life. I would really not wish a life of leisure upon any of my friends, you know. I, right, like there's a reason why when people win the lottery, like it's not like they instantly become happy, or that every celebrity ever, like, you know, there's a reason that there's no correlation above a very low threshold of money to happiness. Like having all the money in the world and sitting on the beach and not contributing anything and just sort of sitting there doesn't make you happy. It just makes your soul atrophy, just like never exercising makes your muscles atrophy. You just, you know, we exist to push up against something, to strengthen ourselves, to challenge ourselves. So we should want to do, to be, to challenge ourselves. And we should be so lucky as to be able to choose in which fashion we do that, which is why you should choose your sacrifice. But you're still sacrificing. So I don't really buy the maxim you never work a day in your life. It doesn't feel as oppressive, but you're still, to someone else, like other people look at my lifestyle and they're like, you're crazy. You wake up at 4:30 and you know, work for hours a day. And it's like, yeah, but I'm choosing it. So I like it.
And then my last question for you is what advice, if any, do you have to the people who feel like at the present moment they just can't choose their sacrifice, whether they have family obligations or their station in life or their monetary means, whatever the case may be?
Yeah, I mean, at risk of like just completely paraphrasing all of Jordan Peterson's thinking, he talks about aim lower, and he sort of says that tongue in cheek, but it's like, you know, there's a famous Navy admiral, McCraven is his name, amazing guy. He should run for president. I'm not even a Republican, but I think he should run for president. He wrote a book called Make Your Bed, which I've read. Like one small act in the beginning of the day, which is like, I can do something, I can accomplish something, I have control over this, sets your whole framework for the day. Jordan Peterson says like, aim lower. Like even if you have like a miserable, hourly wage dead end job, or you don't love the person you're with, or anyone can take their station in life, their plot in life, and aim one or two notches above and navigate there. Right. And we all aren't going to be able to start a company or become a billionaire or pursue our childhood passion of becoming an astronaut or whatever. But we all can be slightly better versions of ourselves, and then slightly better than that, and slightly better than that. And that's all anyone does. Right. I think like I spoke to one of the guys who was one of the first few employees at Facebook. He said even Facebook, when you were inside it, was stacking S curves, which is like an entrepreneur's way of saying an S curve is no growth, a lot of growth, no growth. And then you put another one, no growth, a lot of growth. And so you just stack S curves. And so what he was trying to say is even Facebook wasn't like a smooth ride. It wasn't just like a slingshot to the moon. On the inside, it still felt like, oh my gosh, we're stalling. We're not making progress. How are we going to do it this month? How are we going to beat our numbers? How are we going to grow for years? Right. And so anyone's life, like you think it's so easy, but you double click on, that's why I like listening to Matthew McConaughey or these Navy SEALs or people who like have it made. It's like, no, they don't. They broke down their muscle fiber by fiber by fiber too. And anyone can climb the staircase. You just have to put your foot on the step and go step by step by step by step by step.